Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah McCarthy, not John Emmons II. so thank you all for joining us. I'm one of the Westchester committee members, and I'm super excited. My husband and I are both serving on a committee here, and we got our results back, and so we're still committee members from the primary, so that's always good news. So my job today is really to help make this town hall run very smoothly. So I ask that everyone put yourself on mute if you're not already. I might be going in during the time when John is speaking to mute you in case there's any background noise. I have two small dogs that lose it at any point, so I try to keep myself on mute as well. My other job today is going to be monitoring the chat. So with the chat feature, it's really cool. If you scroll down on your screen, you should be able to see like a little bubble, and underneath it says chat. All you're going to do is click that, and then you can post any questions that you have. You can post them anytime during this session, and I'll be sure to collect those questions for John and kind of hand those off during the Q&A. I'm also trying to admit people into the town hall as well. So that's all kind of housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, once again, chat is your friend. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce John Emmons. So John Emmons is a current Republican committeeman in the Chester County area who is now running for U.S. Congress for PA District 6. So Chester County for the win. John has a BS in chemical engineering from SUNY at Buffalo and has a really impressive background as manufacturing and an operations executive. John is married to Allison for over 39 years. I need to know the secrets, and has 3 children and 3 grandchildren. So John, I will let you take it from here. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. And Hannah mentioned about us being married for 39 years. We are now just about 1 month shy of our 40th anniversary. On July 5th, we'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary, 4 decades. I'm not sure where it all went, but it's been a fun ride, and I look forward to the next 40. So with that, let's jump into the meeting. Again, thank you for being here. This is our series that we've set up every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock for now. We are having this town hall, and hopefully in the coming weeks, we will start to be able to do some real town halls and have a blend of the two. So we really look forward to doing that. The agenda for today has 4 major categories. And let me just tick through those so you have an idea what's coming. First, I'm going to start off, and I'm going to give a few comments regarding the topic that we chose for today. Then I'll hand off to our guest speaker, who will go into more specific detail, obviously, on that topic. And then when she's done with that, I will jump back in, and I will have some other remarks associated with the rule of law. I think that's terribly pertinent given what we've seen going on this week. So that's the 3rd major thing. And then the 4th major thing, and probably the biggest of all, will be the Q&A. We typically have half an hour or even more sometimes of Q&A, and we really enjoy that, believe it or not. So those are the 4 topics we're going to be working through over about the next hour. You know, as I mentioned this last week, I think this meeting is probably going to be a little on the heavy side because of everything we see going on in the country right now. It's you have the backdrop of COVID-19 and everything we've been through the last 3 months or so. And then on the backs of that, we see the issues that we've experienced the last week or so. You know, the aftermath of the death of George Floyd, and then the rioting, the looting, the lawlessness that we've seen. That obviously is very disturbing, and it has the attention of most everyone in one way, shape, or form. So it's been this week, there's been terrible things that we've all witnessed, but there's also been some good things. And I think that the good things I want to highlight, going back to Tuesday, we had our primary election here in Pennsylvania. And I was actually very much encouraged by that. There was a huge amount of energy. There was a lot of enthusiasm. I saw people come to the polls that had not voted in 6 years. Yes, 6 years. That means they missed the 2016 presidential election. But given everything going on right now, people are coming out of the woodwork. And I see that as being very positive. Also, I saw a number of examples where we have people on write-in ballots coming in as committee people. People are really energized right now, and I really believe that will continue to grow between now and November. So we had that early in the week and all the enthusiasm around that. And then towards the end of the week, we got that favorable jobs report that was a nice stimulus here at the end of the week, where we actually saw 2.5 million jobs added back in. So that is very encouraging. And now that more and more of Pennsylvania, I guess all of Pennsylvania now is either yellow or green, that will also help tremendously in June, so that when we get to July, those employment numbers should just continue to improve. So even as heavy as the week was with all of the issues around the rioting and the looting, I think there are a number of very positive things, and I don't want to lose sight of those. That is very important. The topic for today is really a topic that has 3 different levels. The top level is clearly reopening the Pennsylvania economy. We've been pounding on that for 3 or 4 weeks because what's happened over the last 3 months has virtually impacted almost every Pennsylvanian in one way, shape, or form. And it's so critical that we get the economy going again for all the reasons mentioned in previous town halls. So that is still the umbrella. But we wanted to talk specifically today about one aspect of that, and that was a decision that Governor Wolf made regarding redirecting $47 million of money that was earmarked for Catholic schools and non-public schools, and he redirected that to public schools. So we want to delve into that deeper to hear more about that. And then the third level really builds from that, and that's the arbitrariness of the decisions that have been made. We've given many, many examples over the last couple of months of the very arbitrariness of this whole process. And we felt that we needed to hit that one more time. Now, as we started to talk about this topic through the course of the week, people on more than one occasion said, why are you picking this topic now? With everything else going on, why are you doing this? And I think there's really 3 answers to it. And it's not a simple answer, but the 3 topics are: 1, I think it's important to highlight at least one more time what's been going on in the Wolf administration. And for example, we talked about the arbitrariness of the decisions. Well, what you've seen over the course of the last 3 months is very much a dictatorial approach by Governor Wolf, deciding, not always fact-based, but just making decisions on what should be done. And that has been very dictatorial and very arbitrary. So it's important to make sure we keep that first and foremost, and why is that happening? Secondly, I think it gives us a glimpse at what can happen. This is a clear example of government picking winners and losers. And why that's near and dear to my heart is there's way too much of that going on in the country today. As the government gets bigger and bigger and more intrusive, virtually everything they do, whether it's intended or not, it results in them picking winners and losers. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress, because I do not agree with that. We need smaller government. We don't need government picking winners and losers. Let the free market do that. And then thirdly, I think this is more of a question than a statement, but with what we've seen going on, both with the COVID-19 and with the events of the last week, does that give us a glimpse of what fundamentally transforming America is? We've heard a lot of talk over the last few months about the need to fundamentally transform America. Well, when you get centralized power whether it be at the federal level or even at a state level, you invariably you get the arbitrariness and the dictatorial decision making that we've seen. That's not America. But is this what they mean by fundamentally transforming America? I think it's a question we have to ask and really think about. And why? Well, again, I know I'm singing to the choir for the most part, but this November, we collectively will make a decision. The decision that we make in November regarding this next election, it will set the course for what America and I believe the rest of the world will be going forward. This is a huge decision that's coming up in November. And I really believe with every ounce of my heart that the decision that we make collectively as a people will either set us on a path that is very positive, uplifting, or it will put us on a path that is going to be very hard, if not impossible, to recover from. So this is huge. So we need to put all of our energy into making sure we have the right outcome. So the question comes down to is, will we choose freedom and opportunity, or will we choose a secure servitude? That's really what I think it comes down to. Freedom and opportunity versus a form of servitude. That's what we're looking at. Now, I know that's heavy, but I really believe that's what we're facing. That's what's at stake. So that's why I want to talk about it and delve into that one more time. So on a happy note, though, what I'd like to do is introduce our speaker today. Our guest is Christine Flowers. Christine is an attorney, and she's also a columnist. She's been a columnist for, as I understand, probably around 17 years, and she can fill that in if she'd like. She is a product of the Villanova Law School, so yay, local, and I think we all have a warm spot in our heart for Villanova these days. And the other thing is, I was reading about her in the last couple of days, which I think is remarkable, is that she is fluent in 4 different languages. I'm not sure I'm even fluent in 1, and she's fluent in 4. So I think that says a lot in and of itself. So what I'd like to do is introduce Christine, and she's going to talk in more depth around this decision that Governor Wolf made around the $47 million in diverting it. So I think she's going to speak on the specifics of that, but also in a more general term of what the implications are for that type of decision making. So Christine, we hand it off to you. Do we have Christine, Hannah?
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes.
There we go. Good morning. How are you? Happy anticipatory anniversary, John, to you and your wife. That's wonderful. That's a huge accomplishment in this day and age. So kudos and great congratulations to you. And thank you so much for asking me today. And good morning, everyone out there. I was very, very happy and honored to have been asked to speak this morning. Yes, I am. I am a wildcat. I am actually the product of, let me see, 12, 4, 3, 15, 15 years of Catholic school education. Actually 16 years if you count kindergarten. So this is near and dear to my heart, this topic that you're talking about. You made some really important comments at the beginning of the town hall as you were leading into this specific topic. And you pinpointed 3 reasons, 3 important aspects of why we really need to focus on what Governor Wolf is doing right now and what other state executives are doing. I would like to add a 4th aspect to this, and it's applicable to this specific topic on schools. They always say that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. I used to be a school teacher. I taught at Villa Maria Academy, which is an all-girls Catholic school. I taught at the Haverford School, which is a private, secular, all-boys school. And I taught at Friends Select, which is a co-ed Quaker school in Philadelphia. So education is extremely important to me, both having been a student and having been a teacher. And I always say that, yeah, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, but the hand that holds the chalk at the chalkboard also rules the world. Teachers are extremely important. The educational system is extremely important. It essentially sows the seeds for the future plants and flowers that we see. And so anything that impacts education in either a negative or a positive way is extremely important and has an impact far beyond the immediate. So the thing that really upset me, and I'll explain what happened with what Governor Wolf did, is that it doesn't just have an immediate impact today, tomorrow, in the next couple of weeks. It is, as you explained, John, establishing a pattern whereby a very powerful executive can decide what he wants to do with the future of his state or the future of his municipality. That future being future voters, future voting citizens. And you start training and grooming those future voters in first and second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth grade. So to give you a little bit of background, because of the pandemic and because of the severe negative impact that the closure of schools, essential closure of schools, I mean, we have virtual teaching, but because of the economic damage that's being done because of the pandemic, the federal government allocated under the CARES Act millions and millions and millions of dollars to states across the nation, money that was dedicated money that was supposed to have been used to help support those schools in those states that are suffering. The federal government issued guidelines, specific guidelines that determined the Department of Education specifically stated how those monies should be allocated. And the word equitably was used, equitably. That word has been manipulated by Governor Wolf. What he has done, there were, I believe, $66 million were allocated to Pennsylvania under the CARES Act. I'm sorry, not 66 million, 400 and some million dollars were allocated to Pennsylvania. 66 million of those dollars should have been allocated to private schools, whether they be Catholic, whether they be private non-sectarian like the Haverford School, charter schools, which are sort of a hybrid. Instead, we are getting, I believe, $44 million less than we would have been entitled to, because the governor has decided that since, according to his statistics, there are a greater number of low-income students that attend public schools, he's decided that he wants to supplement their educations at the expense of private school students. Now, when you say private school, what comes to mind? Kids wearing blazers with those little, those little embroidered, and I wore a blazer for 12 years. I went to Mary and Mercy Academy. But this idea of the privileged child that goes to the private school, and that's a fallacy. I'm an immigration attorney. The majority of my immigration clients, their parents, their children go to either Catholic schools, Christian schools, charter schools, or some other form of non-public institution. That should give you an idea of the population and the demographic of so many of the non-public schools in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That yes, we do have the the more affluent schools, the more affluent private schools. Obviously, we do. We have that. But we also have many, specifically parochial schools in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, for example, who cater to those parents who don't have great means, financial means, but they don't want to put their child in a public school, specifically the public schools in the city of Philadelphia, which, as we know, are failing. So the idea, the premise from Governor Wolf that it is better to take care of the children who are in public schools because those are the ones who are suffering the most is a flawed premise to begin with. But even beyond that, the idea that Governor Wolf would just simply redesign this grant of money, federal money, our tax dollars, not his. These are federal monies that were earmarked for Pennsylvania schools. The idea that Governor Wolf can just change the whole landscape and decide that he's got favorites that he wants to pick and that he wants to give a special advantage to is very troubling. It's as troubling, and this is a little off topic, but this is also something that's really been upsetting me for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's as upsetting as his decision to keep abortion clinics open and operating as essential life-sustaining businesses. Isn't that ironic? When he shut down 3/4 of the economy, and I know, John, in your prior town halls, you addressed the crushing impact, economic impact, personal impact this is having on small businesses, mom and pop enterprises across this Commonwealth. And particularly in southeastern Pennsylvania, as we've seen, as the iron grip of Tom Wolf has come down particularly hard on Delaware and Montgomery and Bucks and Philadelphia and Berks and Lehigh counties, Chester, that we are truly, truly suffering because of arbitrary decisions. And they are arbitrary decisions being made by Governor Wolf. So in my column in the Delaware County Times, I had linked to basically the explanation that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that the executive at the governor's office gave for their reason in diverting funds from private and Catholic schools to public schools. And again, it's based on that flawed premise that public schools cater to and serve more disadvantaged children than private schools do. But even if that were the case, even if that truly were the case, and for the sake of argument, I will agree that probably numerically in Philadelphia, for example, the urban landscape is such that, yes, the public schools do serve a larger proportion of impoverished children. But even if that were truly the case, it's not within the bailiwick. It's not the right of the executive of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to take federal tax dollars that all of us have paid into the pot and divert them to his special interest groups. And let's not ignore the fact that Governor Wolf is held hostage to the teachers unions, to, again, when we were talking about the abortion clinics, he is a huge supporter of Planned Parenthood. So obviously he is doing things in a very partisan manner to advance his own specific special interests. And we're in a pandemic. This money is not federal titled money. This is not money that that we have to worry about the specific allocations under Title IX or whatever that be. This is emergency funding for schools and children that are failing. My nephew is in a diocesan school. He's in the 5th grade. His principal was quoted in my column. There is an outrage on the part of the principals, of the teachers especially, the people who are there in the trenches. I remember what it was like to be a teacher, and it's not easy. It is the most important job that exists in society today, and it is probably one of the least appreciated and the most difficult to do. And the teachers are outraged that they're being denied money because of some ideologue sitting in Harrisburg. So I would urge anybody listening right now, and the money is still in the process of being allocated, I would urge people to contact their state representatives and contact Harrisburg and tell them how outraged you are at the discrimination, and I would even go so far as to say bigotry against some religious schools that's being displayed by our chief executive in Pennsylvania. So, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll pick up here, and that'll give people a chance to type in their questions through the chat function, and then Hannah can feed those. It's interesting. The next topic I wanted to go to, it's very much related, and it just happened to dawn on me as Christine was talking, that I wanted to speak to the rule of law, and what more appropriate with a lawyer on as a guest.
Right.
But the reason I wanted to hit on the rule of law, there's a couple aspects of this. First of all, as I look at it, when you think about we're talking about the arbitrariness of certain government. So you have that on the one hand. To me, almost the opposite of that is the rule of law. Because the more you deviate from the rule of law, you're becoming more and more arbitrary. That's why the law is there, to set down constraints that people can live within. So I wanted to touch on the rule of law, even just from the standpoint of what we're seeing from the Wolf administration, but then obviously also across the country. But keep in mind that this is not something that's new. This has been coming for quite a while. That's why you pack all that together, and that's why I wanted to comment on it. Now, I'm sure every person that's on this town hall has an appreciation for the rule of law, but I just wanted to underscore some things because it is so very critical. So why do I say that it's so very critical? Well, when you stop and think about it, the rule of law is clearly the basis for civil society. Without the rule of law, it's also the basis for security. You have no security if you don't have the rule of law. If you don't have the rule of law, what do you have? You have chaos and anarchy, lawlessness. That's what we've been seeing this past week, because there are places where people have made the decision they're going to step down. They're going to try to let the steam blow off, whatever the rationale is. I don't even want to go there in some cases. But the rule of law has been suspended in a number of places across this country. And whether it's for a short term like this, my concern is more of a longer term trend. Without the rule of law, our society starts to break down, and we don't have those underpinnings in our society that we need to have an effectively functioning society. Not only do we have the situation where you have the anarchy and the chaos, but in a more subtle way, you also have the situation, and I think this is the thing that you will find the most obvious, I guess, is that in many cases we're seeing more and more where laws are either not applied, period, or where laws are not applied equally across the board. And that's even a worse form, where they're just either ignored altogether, or people in authority are picking and choosing which laws they're going to enforce. That's arbitrary. That leads to a breakdown in society. So the rule of law is critical. Now, I mentioned earlier, this is not new. I'm sure in one form or another, this has gone on probably forever. But I know in the 60 years that I've been alive, it sure seems like it's increasing and it's accelerating. And there's probably no less than 6 different reasons why that's happening. And I think that could be the thesis of a whole dictatorial presentation of why that's happening. but I do believe that it's happening, and it's very concerning because where does it end? And that goes back to the decision that I mentioned earlier. It's part of the decision that we have coming up in November. Are we going down a path where we respect the rule of law and we hold it up and we work hard to maintain the rule of law? Or are we going down a path where that's just a suggestion and people are going to do things arbitrarily depending on the power that they hold? So I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up today, because it's probably one of the most fundamental underpinnings of our society. And if we somehow let that get away from us, then we will have a world of chaos. And I don't think any of us want that. That's not the future we want. And if that's what some people are working for, if that's what the transformation is, the fundamental transformation that they're asking for, then clearly that's not what any of us want. So at the end of the day, many of the things that we talk about recently are about security, and that's becoming more and more the focus of my platform. It always was there, but it was subtle. Now it's more and more pronounced. You see the security issues of the last week. If bands of people are allowed to just go and break and destroy public and private property, then what security do we have? We saw in the COVID-19 situation, we lost some of our security around supply chain. We discovered all of a sudden one day that we had no production of antibiotics here in the United States. So that's a personal security issue. We talked about healthcare and the way that the healthcare direction is going with regard to single payer system. What security there if we don't control our healthcare system? So security is becoming more and more of an issue, and that's one of the most fundamental, if not the most fundamental aspect of life, is to have security first, and all other things are built on that. So rule of law is absolutely essential. So we have to ask ourselves, are we dedicated to that or are we not? I think I will always fight for the rule of law. It is so essential. It is the fundamental building block. I will always fight for that. Liberty and justice for all. And without it, we have nothing. So end of sermon, but this is absolutely critical and we need to fight for it. We have the next 5 months, we have a huge fight on our hands, and depending on what we collectively decide, we will set the course in one direction or the other for this country and for the world. So let me pause there, and we will then go on to Q&A. So Hannah,
Oh man.
any good questions that have come in so far?
So far, so good. So
don't worry, this group never lets us down.
I know, this is good. I'm learning a lot with these questions too. So here's the first one. What is the recourse to force Governor Wolf to adhere to the law and restore funding to Catholic and other private schools? Is it a lawsuit? What would be that approach?
Christine, I might let you take a shot at that.
Hi, Hannah. That looks you got a great assistant over there. Well, there has been some recourse to there have been some petitions to Josh Shapiro, Attorney General of Pennsylvania, to see if he could actually bring action against the Commonwealth. We could try and see if we could file some kind of action in Commonwealth court. It is difficult though, because obviously any kind of legal action takes time. Fortunately, we do have a little bit of time because schools are now going to be, most of them have either closed for the summer or are about to close. So the funding that would be applicable would be for the upcoming year. So there is a little bit of time to do something. I've been talking to some individuals who want to file a class action on behalf of private schools, not just Catholic schools. And I do want to make the point that this, while Catholic schools are my prime concern, because they seem to be the ones that will suffer the most because of this. But this is not just about Catholic schools. This is about Christian schools. This is about Jewish yeshiva schools. This would be about any type of non-public school, including some charter schools, because even though they are designed as private school, as public schools, they have private administration. They're not really bound by the directives of the Department of Education. So there are things that are happening, but really the most important thing would be for you out there to call, to write, to petition your state representatives, find out who your state representatives are, put the pressure on them, because they are the conduits. They are the ones who can go after, who can really put the pressure on Governor Wolf. He seems to be immune to a lot of this. He does what he wants to do anyway, but there has to be a groundswell of anger. You see the protests in the streets of Philadelphia and in other cities today. It's a presence. They're making themselves known. Whether we agree with the way they're doing it or not, they're making themselves known. We cannot just sit back and say, oh, this is what's happening. Write, call, and yes, there are lawsuits being planned. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. This one is kind of semi-related to that a little bit. So Wolf has refused to release the criteria for what is an essential business. Has Wolf released a criteria for disbursement of education funds?
The criteria didn't really specifically release the criteria in the detail that we would like, but if you do go to the pa.gov website, there is a link where he explains why he, what are the parameters that he used in determining what schools deserve, what are the metrics that he used to determine need. So what schools need what amount of money. And it's very vague. It's very, and I actually included it in my column in the Delco Times. If you go to the Delco Times website and plug in my name in the search engine, it was about 2 weeks ago that the column appeared. But go to the pa.gov website and you will see there's a link that actually gives you the parameters by which they're making those determinations. Again, it's very vague.
That checks out for what's happening.
Just a related comment too is I think we heard 3 weeks ago from Kristen Leinbach from Berks County about how Wolf was using a similar tactic with regard to the counties. So he got CARES Act money from the federal government. In that case, he hadn't given it out yet. So there you have a couple issues. One, potential delay in getting that money to where it was intended to go, and then threatening to use it in one way or another to reward people that were doing what he wanted them to do. So that's another classic example where he's using funds that were not for him, obviously, but for his state, and he's weaponized those and is using it to his agenda press forward. So Lord knows how many other examples are out there that we just don't see visibly. Quite honestly, I think what has happened is they've overwhelmed the system. There's so many things, it's hard to keep track of all of them. And thankfully, we get to see certain examples like what Christine has put forward today, but we can only imagine how many other things may be going on that we're not aware of.
Absolutely.
And a horrific example of what happened with the nursing homes, with the regulations that the Department of Health, the Secretary of Health, Rachel Levin, put forward with respect to admissions to nursing homes of COVID positive patients. And we saw, the great scandal involving her, where she moved her mother under the cover of darkness out of one of those nursing homes into a hotel. So she herself would not be affected by the negative impact. And we've had a significant rise in COVID deaths, COVID-related deaths among residents of nursing homes, directly related to the decision of the Wolf administration through its Secretary of Health.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we have a question. Please give us the stats again as to the amount of federal grants and the amount that Wolf has allocated in the difference. What are we losing in grant money?
we're losing $44 million of the, I believe it was 66 million that were allocated to, you know what, I may be wrong on the, I know that we are being deprived of $44 million that should have been allocated to Catholic and other non-public schools. $44 million. So out of 66 million that should have been allocated, I believe we're getting something along the lines of 17 million. That's almost, what's that, I was not good in math. That's why I specialized in languages in college. I think it's like 75% deficit of what we're getting. So it's just, it's really, and can I just make this comment? While I don't, again, want to frame this in a religious, context, Governor Wolf has shown his animus toward Catholic schools in the past, in the prior budget fights when they were seeking funding for books and other supplies for Catholic and non-public schools. He was holding the line against giving any kind of aid or assistance to those schools because of his ideological hostility toward, I don't say necessarily places of faith, but his ideological hostility toward non-public institutions. So this is not the first time that we have seen Governor Tom Wolf, who ran as a moderate, acting in an extremely radical manner.
Thank you. So we're going to pivot a little bit with these questions. This one is nice and spicy. So, who gave the mayor of DC the right to paint the name of a political activist group on public streets? Hasn't the rule of law been suspended over all the USA? So BLM dictates, and BLM is an extension of the Black Panthers in the 1960s who were determined to defund the police.
Well, there's a lot packed into that question.
Yes.
I think that goes to the point that I was trying to make. The rule of law, where does it stand right now? And well, let me give you an example that really bothers me. When you look at what's happened maybe over the last 48 hours, you could argue certainly the rule of law is under attack. But you can make the argument that it's been suspended because mayors and maybe in some cases governors have given the direction for how they want the police force to act. So that probably is within their purview. It's not right, but that's what they've done. So, and they may have a reason for it. Again, not a good reason necessarily, but they have a reason for it. What bothers me more is some of these mayors coming out now and talking about defunding their police force. What in God's name could they be thinking about? When you talk about the rule of law, what's the basis for the rule of law? It's law enforcement. If you somehow eliminate that or change it markedly, who is going to enforce the law? Now, we'd all like to think that we don't need police, but we are humans. Humans tend to err. We all know about human history, and we have seen countless examples over time that when the police back off, then the citizenry is what bears the pain. You have more crime, you have more robberies, you have more fatalities. My real concern now is to this question: are they taking the concept of rule of law and are they institutionalizing the decay of it by either reducing the funding for the police force or by somehow eliminating the police force altogether? To me, that should send off sirens, because that now you're starting to actually make it happen. It's one thing to talk about it, but when and then maybe temporarily have a policy shift for a few days. But when you do something as concrete as defunding your police department, or maybe even abolishing them, my mind can't even fathom that. But the fact that they're talking about it it really shows you where we are today. When you think about that, and you think about all the other things that are being talked about openly. You know, Tucker Carlson had an interesting point last night that went to this. He said, if people are talking about this and no one is fighting back, then all too often these things become a reality. So he was calling on all of us to fight back. If we fight back and fight this idiocy around the defunding of police departments and suspension of the rule of law, then it will become more the norm. And the more that happens, then we will just see acceleration of that.
That's exactly right, John. What you just said is extremely, extremely important. People out there, and you know, we're not shy about speaking out. You're not, I'm not. I have a feeling that most of the people who are listening in today are not, and they're speaking out on social media and in their private lives. But we need to push back. We cannot let the narrative be that BLM is a peaceable group of people who are, you know, seeking to march for civil rights. They are not. They are not MLK. BLM is an extremely different animal altogether. And as someone mentioned, it does have its roots in the activism of the Black Panthers. There are other groups out there that are seeking to sort of hijack what is a very legitimate criminal justice problem. When you do have police, but there is such a thing as police brutality. For us to ignore that is naive and wrong. But to make that the default position, to make that the sort of the core of this crusade, that we need to defund the police because the police are inherently at a granular level racist and wrong, is dangerous if we let that be the narrative and we don't push back against it. Today is June 6th. 76 years ago, my great cousin, Adolph Pace, landed on the shores at Normandy. He was a paratrooper in that legendary infantry, in that legendary brigade. And those men were fighting for a flawed, but an America that was greater and still is greater than any of the places that exist in the dark corners of the world. The problem with the protesters today is that they are not fighting to preserve the greatness of America. They are not fighting to make us better and to excise those small cancerous tumors that do exist, like police brutality in limited situations. What they are doing is they are trying to overthrow what we have, our institutions. They are trying to redesign America according to some utopian ideal that they have. And that is dangerous. And we do need to speak out about that because, as you said, silence is consent. Silence is capitulation. We need to point out what they are doing. And people should not be shamed by PC ideas of respect into silence. This is an important watershed moment in our political lives, and we really need to fight back. I'm sorry, I don't mean to hijack the conversation, but it's extremely important that those points be made.
No, that's very much appreciated.
Thank you. I have a question here from Marianne. I read an article that universities are being asked to eliminate any police. So what happens if a girl is raped or a boy is mugged?
That's that's extremely dangerous. Fortunately, with respect to you know, a girl is raped, when you talk about the whole idea of sexual assault on campus, the Trump administration has actually done some great things with respect to the reorganization of due process rights for both victims and the accused. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with the actual, you know, situation of security and police on campus. But, you know, I do want to do a shout out to Betsy DeVos and the Department of Education for giving back to the accused in those situations. You know, we have this Me Too issue. Some of the rights that were stripped from them under President Obama's administration. As far as not having police and security on campus, well, that's just going to create anarchy. That's just going to create a free-for-all situation and create a powder keg, because campuses are filled with young people who are, for the very first time, living on their own, experiencing a lot of freedoms, which are, you know, a wonderful experience, but at the same time, judgment is not always the best. And you need that kind of structure to help guarantee that, you know, crime is going to be limited to, you know, as small a percentage as possible. John, what do you think?
No, I think you're right. I have trouble getting beyond the fundamental thought. And I have to be careful with this because I'm the engineer. So I always think in those terms. But like, for example, with the example of the bad cop, we're all humans. Within any population, there's going to be good and bad. Fortunately, the bad is always a very small piece of that. And we always need to be vigilant around it, but it should not be a surprise when there is an event, because, I mean, just hypothetically, if say there's 1 million police officers, if 1% of those are bad, and I wouldn't even say it's 1%, but just say for calculational sake, that says that there would be potentially 10,000 people out there that might do something like that. So to me, it's more a case of, in that particular instance, what safeguards do we have in place? And are there things that are occurring today that make it difficult for police departments to actually act when they know they have a bad actor? I don't know, but I suspect that's the case. I would hazard to believe that most people that demonstrate that behavior, when we see it on the film on TV, that's not the first time they've done it. So I think, but do their supervisors have the authority to make the interventions that need to be made to deal with people like that? I don't know. I suspect probably not. But I think that's the issue. And I know I'm going away from the campus thing, but we have to realize that human nature, and we have to protect people, even especially in that college environment where you take the norms of human beings and you throw things like alcohol on top of that, you're going to have bad things happen. And you have to have the structures and things in place to control that. So clearly this whole talk about disbanding different types of security forces, to me, is 180 degrees in the wrong direction. We need to be improving understanding what is working, what isn't working, and where there's something that's not working, moving in the direction of being better. So clearly this is totally in the wrong direction.
Thank you. So let's keep going on with these questions. Really good stuff. There is another one actually related to this that just came in. So what can be done to break the monopoly of college universities? During the pandemic, they shut down their schools and few were given any sort of refunds. While we know the quality of education is suffering, most kids and families see fewer other options.
I'm really not sure. I mean, I agree that I think students should have gotten a refund. You had a situation where they pay through their nose. I mean, I think we've addressed this before in other sessions where the expense of college education today, the inflation has grown to where I know from when I went to school and how many hours I would have needed to work in order to support a year of college versus what it is now. It can be 3 and 4 times what it was back then. So you pay dearly, and then you have an event come along like this, and it disrupts your school year, and basically they tell you have to go away. I don't know what the exact answer is, but I think there should be some type of a rebate for those students.
There should be that. I mean, I'm wondering, and you know, I don't know how the mechanism would be either, but if the school is refusing to give a refund, which they absolutely should, then perhaps, and this wouldn't apply, unfortunately, to people who just graduated, but for the following academic year, I'm wondering if the student or the parents can simply just say, okay, Well, I'm not going to pay whatever the differential is going to be. I'm going to pay you that much less in this year's tuition. And who could stop them? I mean, I'm sure that there is some way, but that seems to be a fair kind of like the security deposit thing when you have a rental and you've damaged the apartment. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't seem fair that people should not get a refund. And you know, I dealt with a lot of foreign students. I deal with foreign students in my immigration practice. I feel horribly for them who were kicked off of campus because the campus is closed, and a lot of them had no homes to go to because they live abroad. Their residence is abroad. You know, they should have some kind of recourse as well to get either a rebate, or the schools should have found housing for them. I know that some of them, you know, at Temple and Penn were just completely kicked off of campus without any kind of notice or recourse. It's very troubling the way that this has, as you said, this power to just shut down society. And are we talking about COVID today? No, we're talking about protests in the streets. Mm-hmm. So, you know, are the protesters wearing masks? No. The paradigm completely shifts whenever we decide what's the important thing. Today, it's not COVID anymore. Today, it's police brutality.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Hannah, I think going along with that, when you think about the college structure, I think the structure is in place to be able to make that happen, the rebate. For example, you have the whole state school system. Well, with the state school system, the state could make those types of decisions and deal with that. I love that idea. For anyone who wasn't a senior, then just apply that to their tuition, a tuition reduction for the next year to make that whole. And then, quite honestly, there's no money out of pocket. They just have to adjust their planning for the next year. And then many of the larger private schools have huge endowments that I think they could absorb it, quite honestly. And you got some schools like Penn State that has both. They're part of the state school system, and they also have a huge endowment. So I don't see any reason why they should not do this.
Thank you. Yep. Well, we have two last questions, or time for two more questions. And these are going to be great to kind of wrap up this session with. So, related to Tuesday's primary, it appears mail-in ballots significantly impacted the primary election results in Chester County. What is the Republican strategy to counter and encourage mail-in ballots given the large amount of Democrat mail-in ballots?
Well, I think the strategy, I'm not sure there is necessarily a strategy right now. I think there will be shortly, but I think up to this point, there was a lot of question marks around the whole mail-in ballot process, and I think those question marks will remain. So I think what needs to happen is, I think we need to step back and look at what happened through this process, and what were the positive things, what were the negative things, and those need to be shored up, because what it all comes down to confidence. Voters have confidence in the system. Right now, I think it's fair to say, now this is broad brushing it, but from a broad standpoint, Republicans do not have confidence in that system, and Democrats either have confidence or they see it as an opportunity, whichever. But I think what the Republicans have to do is to, one, we have to make sure, first and foremost, we have to make sure we get people out to vote. So that's the primary thought. Now, with that, so I would prefer as many people as possible to go vote in person, because then if there is anything going on in the background around fraud or shenanigans, then that will circumvent that. But there is a segment of the population that it actually benefits them to have mail-in ballots. If you tend to be older, maybe even if you're a business person and you're not sure whether you're going to be there on election day, it gives you a nice opportunity to do that. So I think what we need to do is to make sure we have as many of the holes plugged as possible. And then secondly, with that, continue the process of communicating to people what the process is. So presumably they have a good process. So that needs to be verified first. But then secondly, we need to communicate that out to the public, primarily the Republicans, that here are the safeguards that are in place so you can have confidence when you place your vote. We're a long ways away from that. I'll give you my personal experience. I intentionally did the mail-in ballot to test the process. And I got it, it was slow coming back. So there's strike one. So strike two, because I waited 24 hours, I didn't have time to mail it because it takes, for some reason, it takes 4 days to get from my house to Westchester. I could run it in 4 hours. It took 4 days for someone to take a letter. So I took my mail-in ballot to one of the 5 satellite areas. As I approached the satellite areas, I had to get out of the car to put it in the container. The guy didn't say anything to me. I said, "Don't you need to see my driver's license?" He said, "Don't worry about it." And I've heard that from several other people. So I know the various safeguards that are supposed to be in place are not in place. They need to be in place. And only with that will we have the confidence of the Republican voters that they can rely on it. But again, bottom line is get to the polls yourself if you can possibly do it. Don't rely on the mail-in ballots, but where you have to, we need to shore that system up and communicate it out.
Thank you. Our final question is, based on the primary results, it looks like we need to motivate Republicans and independents to get out and vote. What are the plans to energize the base and ensure we have a majority come election day? How can we help?
That's a really good question, and it's something that I spend about 20 hours a day thinking about. But I think what we're going to test here shortly is you have the results from Tuesday, but is that really a fair representation of where people are? I don't think it is. I won't read too much into those results right now. I think the energy is there, the energy is building. Quite honestly, there's going to be more energy. My sense is, and what I saw on Tuesday, there's more energy right now, and it's continuing to build more energy than there was in 2009 and 2010. So I think that's positive. Now, to the point of the question, we have to continually reach out through a variety of means, through volunteers, through advertisements, through all of the above, to get the message across that it's vital to vote. Here are great candidates to vote for, but you absolutely have to get out and vote. And then part of that too, part of our process over the next 5 months is to identify all those folks and to have a very solid get out the vote process that really begins about the 3rd week in September, because the get out the vote process is not a 2 or 3 day event this year. Because of the mail-in option, we will start that get out the vote with that facet way back in the end of September, and that will carry through to October. And then some of the more traditional get out the vote things will take place towards the end of October, leading into the election day. So it's a huge amount of work. So it's a combination of all of the above. So we need the volunteers, we need the donations so we can get up on TV and radio and be able to make our message broader there. So it really is all of the above. So we encourage people to volunteer, to get involved. That would be wonderful. To donate 10 or 20 bucks or whatever, it all adds up. It's very important. And as we do that, we'll be able to get the message out and prevail in November.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So that concludes the Q&A portion. Thank you everybody who attended today, and thank you, Christine, for being here.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much for your hard work. And John, thank you so much for having me as a guest. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it. I know you're extremely busy, so we really thank you for carving time out and being able to be here today. Thank you.
And anything for a good candidate. We need you in DC. Absolutely. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. And everyone stay tuned. We'll be back on next Saturday. We'll probably shift to a slightly different topic and kind of get back more to issues and continue the introduction of me. So stay tuned and look forward to the event notices coming out. And in the meantime, we're getting a lot of inquiries through the website. We're trying to answer all of them. We're trying to do it as quickly as possible. So keep the cards and letters coming. Keep the communications coming. Really appreciate it. It's great to see. Also follow us on social media. We're trying to continually build our presence there. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, help us grow the Army. It'd be very much appreciated.
John, will this be recorded so I can put it on my social media? Because I'd like to spread the word about you too.
Yes, it is recorded, and we'll be able to distribute that probably either later today or early tomorrow.
Great, good.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.